Hi, welcome to another edition of This Issue. My guest this time is Kathleen McGee, who's a social justice activist from Modenham. Kathleen, thanks for being here today.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for asking.
I hope you're doing well.
I'm doing very well, and it's a beautiful, hot, sunny day here in Maine. Hopefully not too many more of these really hot, sunny days here in Maine with global warming.
You've been, as usual, following closely the events happening in Augusta.
Yes.
You, for years, have worked on state issues. And so today I thought we'd talk about some of that. Give us a rundown on this last legislative session, especially the tax bill and other important bills that have just been working their way through Augusta. What's happened?
Well, they're usually 2,000 to 2,500 bills before the legislature every session now. There are a lot, but really there are only 3 or 4 that anyone really cares about that much. Everyone has their pet project, but there are only a few that ever get really keyed on. And this year, of course, tax reform, which was, as always, held to the very end. The budget is always the big issue, and also very often the big excuse to not tackle some of the other issues that are there, as well as regionalization and consolidation. And of course, the governor has his health care pitch that he does, the Dirigo Health Plan that they work on every year to at least give the at least give people an idea that there will be some kind of health care reform, which we are, I think, still waiting for as well. But those are the big ones that I think, and some environmental issues that were before the legislature this year.
So give us a rundown, starting, let's talk about a couple of them: consolidation, the budget, healthcare. But start with consolidation. What is that really all about?
Yeah, well, the regionalization and consolidation has been something that the governor's been talking about for about 2 or 3 or 4 years, and this seems to be his new Dirigo Health Plan. It's something to politically hang his hat on, and it sounds really pretty. And the Brookings Institute, I think, did in their report did some stuff around regionalization and consolidation. Maine is a big state, so we have a lot of big areas with schools and government and such. Regionalization and consolidation is basically talking about narrowing down different areas of our state to quote-unquote save money. And we're going to save money through administration in schools. They claim we won't be closing schools, but it's when you go into the halls of the State House, they snicker when you say that. Everyone knows it's going to mean closing schools. And this is what the governor is saying is going to save us as far as spending, the terrible spending we have in Maine, which is very much a Republican mantra that the Democrats have taken on, and that it will kind of deliver us from evil as far as giving us enough money back into the budget to provide for economic development.
So the idea then of consolidation is to have bigger schools, close down some of the smaller schools, and then consolidate them into one big mega school, that kind of thing?
Well, I think that's the long-term effect will be that. Right now they're talking about having there be less superintendents and having there be less administrative costs by regionalizing some of the. We do have a lot of superintendents in Maine, in fact, who make actually a fair bit of money. The thing that's kind of silly about this and about Maine is that Maine is a huge state, and we have what we have, Maine, the way life should be, because we've learned how to be very diverse within the different regions of the state, 2nd and 1st District, and all the areas in between, the coast and the mountains. And that because of that, we really, in order to keep our character and the autonomy of the different towns and the autonomy of the different characters, we really need to be able to have a certain level of non-regionalization and consolidation. We need to be able to stay local. What the governor is hoping to do is by removing some of these superintendents and making that more regional, saving lots and lots of money. There's not a study that I've seen in years and years that has shown that actually has ever worked. And our SADs here, the school administrative districts that were put together decades ago, were meant to also do the same thing, and we're acting as if that never happened. And consequently, this is like a new and improved version of that. I don't believe that it's going to work, and I believe it's going to go in the opposite. We're going in the opposite direction of what actually needs to be done in order to have a strong economy here in Maine.
And how about local governments? Is this consolidation plan also going to lead to the consolidating into bigger county governments that would be less the citizens would have less ability to be involved in because just they're so much bigger.
Yeah.
Is that likely to
I
be
believe
an
so.
outgrowth?
We've talked in the state, we've talked about how we're going to kind of up the level of county government here. We do have county government. It's been pretty lame in Maine for a long time. We do have county commissioners. They are elected. In other states, county government is much bigger and very often more corrupt than here in Maine. But I think that we are going to find that we're going to be moving to that model of doing more county government work. And again, this is the opposite of where we need to be going. Regionalization and consolidation sounds like such a pretty thing. These taglines are so attractive to people who are in politics because you can say something in 2 words and give an idea of what you want, but nobody really knows what you mean when you say that. Regionalization and consolidation. What is that going to mean for you, and what is that going to mean for me when it comes time for our children to go to school or to even register a car, so long as we have them, and do anything else? It's going to take, we already have these, everything is in voicemail. It's going to take us that much farther away from being able to deal with human beings, and it's going to take away the jobs that I think we do have in the local areas that we need, that do help people.
Let's move on to healthcare for a minute. What were the proposals to change healthcare a year ago, and where did that go, and where's that at now?
Well, the one actually good thing that happened with Dirigo Health is that it's becoming a self-administered program, which is what it should have been right from the beginning, that it will be self-insured. How that's going to happen, and if that's going to happen the way that they hope, is a whole other question. Dirigo Health was supposed to be, a long time ago, it was a means to have single-payer health care, supposedly. It was actually used, in my opinion, as a way not to have single-payer health care. It was used to circumvent the process when it started getting closer and closer, when Maine started getting closer and closer to that. Within Dirigo Health, and there are others who could speak much more eloquently on this, who have been more involved in the last 2 years than I, very concerned still about high-risk pools and the other things that are going to be happening in Maine that are going to be taking away our ability to have good, solid health care here. Interestingly, Maine People's Alliance, which worked on Dirigo Health and was a big supporter of the governor and a big supporter of Dirigo Health, is now talking about how, well, that was then, this is now, now we need to look at single-payer health care, and got a call from them the other night raising money for single-payer health care. Well, that's a good thing, but let's make up our mind what it is that we want and then work for it. Dirigo Health has not worked in the way that people had imagined or had hoped. They've done a very poor job of selling it, and the governor has done a very poor job of supporting his own program and keeps changing it, and has not put the support behind it that he needs. So the good thing that happened with Dirigo Health is that it will be a self-insured program. Now we'll see if the governor's actually going to follow up and do what he suggests, and whether Anthem will allow what needs to be done to happen.
I noticed that the governor recently said that there has to be greater budget cuts in the state. The Republicans have been calling for that very clearly in the state. What is the reality, though, of budget cuts in Maine? Whose budget will be cut and whose won't be?
Yeah, well, the budget, there are only a few places where budgets can never be cut anyway. The big ticket items are school and health. And that's what always ends up getting cut or rejiggered. All of the departments in the state always have to, when we come to this place, if we have to cut the budget more, give up 5% of their budget, and they have to figure out a way across the board to cut their budget. Invariably, when that happens in the state agencies, it always ends up being the people on the ground who get cut. And this is why it's so funny, why regionalization and consolidation is so funny, because they're asking superintendents to, we're cutting the superintendents, but when it comes to commissioners and the top level guys and all the state agencies like IF&W and Marine Resources and all of the others, it's the guys on the ground, the people who are actually enforcing the laws that need to get enforced, who get cut. It's not the guys who are making $100,000 a year. But those departments will get cut. But then it's health and human services. That's what gets cut. And schools will get cut. We play games with the 55% funding, which went through a couple of years ago when MMA passed the referendum that the state pay for 55% of funding. The governor and the legislature have tried to jigger that around in 50 different ways in order to not do it. They've provided that in the budget this time, but it's always a game that they play play and what that 55% actually covers. So you can be sure that schools will be hurt. Health and Human Services get hurt, and anything where people are actually involved. You will not see cut in economic incentives for business. You will see the Pine Tree zones expanded, which cut our budget even farther because we're giving away money. We're not bringing that money back in. So you won't. The things you won't see being cut are economic incentives, giveaways to large corporations. That will not be cut. And takes up more and more of our budget every year.
Let's talk about tax reform, something that the state is still waiting for. There was some thought that there was going to be some tax reform this year, but it didn't seem to happen, at least so far. Where are you at on that?
Well, I've worked on tax reform for the last 6 years, both at the State House and on the grassroots level. And it's again somewhat laughable in that you might as well put it on a loop tape, what we hear every year about, well, we'll wait till special session. And we got really close, but we'll wait till special session. What has happened in the last several years around tax reform is that we started with several different referendums that came before the legislature and the state that were very, very right-wing tax reform proposals, the Pulaski tax cap and then Tabor. It seems that, and there were a lot of proposals before the legislature from the Republicans with the same kind of measures in it, which is just let's cut spending, and cut taxes. The Democrats seem to have taken on that mantra of their own with gusto, and what they have provided for this last year for tax reform, what I call tax reform, is making sure that that the wealthy pay their fair share, that corporations pay their fair share, and that everyone, that it's based on ability to pay, and that we've allowed corporate concerns to pay less and less and less and less every year and every decade that's gone by. In New Hampshire, 25% of their budget is paid by corporations. In Maine, it's 2%, and it's getting worse. So what they tried to pass off as tax reform this year was actually very much a Republican program, which would have lowered income tax from 8.25% down to 6%. It would have expanded what they call the homestead exemption, which is a property tax, which property taxes in Maine are high and not based on ability to pay, so that it's very difficult for many people in Maine with the low incomes that we have to actually pay their property taxes. Homestead, unfortunately, is another kind of giveaway to a lot of people with money. Anybody can get it, and they doubled it. They were going to double it this year, up to $26,000, which is the value you take off your home. But anybody can get that. So if you're making $200,000 a year, you get the same benefit as if you're making $20,000 a year. And then there's the circuit breaker program, which they were going to expand a little bit, which is based on ability to pay, but it wasn't going to change enough for it to really matter for a lot of people. And that's where a majority of that money should have gone that they brought in. And expanding the sales base. They were going to expand the sales base just a little bit. It should be expanded dramatically. And then the regressivity of that could be taken care of in other ways.
There was a lot in the newspaper about the sales tax and that there was an outcry. But as I read deeper and deeper into the articles, it appeared that the outcry was largely being organized by a lot of the corporations, and that the public, in fact, really didn't understand the issue that well. Okay. What was your take on the whole sales tax issue in general?
Well, that's a really very good question, and it's what they deal with at the legislature every year. When I was the tax reform campaign director for Maine Citizen Leadership Fund several years ago, and we did polls around the state in all of the areas, in some of the most depressed areas of the state, and with some of the most low income and high income folks. 75% of the folks in Maine understand perfectly well that Maine sales tax is really needs to be overhauled. We pay very little in sales tax here in Maine compared to other states. It's very low. And we don't tax any kinds of services. And we were talking about taxing services that mostly the more wealthy, middle income and low and
Can you give 2 or 3 examples?
Legal services, for one, with an exemption for low income services or free services. That's what accounting, which most low-income people don't pay, and advertising costs. And of course, when that happens, the Chamber of Commerce pulls out all the stops and brings out all of the businesses. And the legislature is lined with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of $300 and $400 and $500 and $600 suits, along with Dana Connors with the silk ties and the Gucci shoes. And that really is true. They come out in full. And unfortunately, the Democrats or progressive community, with the coalition of groups that they had supposedly working on tax reform, don't bring their folks out to do that. So the sales tax is people in the state of Maine completely understand that the sales tax is something that could be changed and bring in a significant amount of money that would help actually low income.
So the bottom line for this session is tax reform over, or is there still a chance that something is going to happen?
Well, the legislature is over, and the governor has said, as he said several years ago, and says every year with tax reform, well, we'll try to tackle it in special session. They won't. They won't tackle it in special session. No.
Okay.
No.
Well, let's move on for a minute. I think we're facing really difficult times ahead. The price of gas is going up dramatically, which is really going to impact working class people. We don't have much public transportation, and that new highway repair bill bond and bridge bond that we just passed only had a very small amount for public transportation in it at a time, I think, when we need to be heavily investing in public transportation. Because of gas prices going up, the food cost is going to go up dramatically. Big corporations are leaving the country. Jobs are leaving the country like crazy as they go and maximize profits overseas. So our local tax base is drying up, and this is why we're having so much of a tax crisis in the country, because these corporations are shipping so many jobs out of the country. And then on top of all that, we're spending $8.5 billion a month on the occupation of Iraq. So that's money that could be used for education, for health care back here at home, dealing with these problems. So what are we to do then as we see what I consider an increasingly difficult economy, not only in this state but across the country, all these contradictions growing, and all this pressure to cut social spending as this contradiction grows? How can we have a real sustainable economy in this country as we look ahead and see these things on the horizon?
Well, and it's a very, very good question, and it's a simple answer, but not necessarily simple to put into place. But my response to that is the antithesis of regionalization and consolidation. It's local, 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 local. Several years ago, I wrote an article about true homeland security, a term I hate, but true homeland security is one where we assure we have local food, we're assured that we have local energy, we're assured that we have the infrastructure that we need, and by that I mean not just roads, but phones and internet, and keeping those things local, keeping those jobs local, and making sure that we build our economies based on what really matters. In other words, we put all of our money into the social fabric, and that in itself creates wealth and jobs and security.
Can you give an example or two to illustrate that point?
Sure. Well, the number one is agriculture, and agriculture. The reason why it matters to have that local in so many ways is one, that certainly creates jobs, but it's we're not transporting, so that we're not using that kind of money that we're using right now on oil. Now that we've hit peak oil, and we're on the downward side of that. So we're not transporting that. We're keeping it local. So the cost of that food is down. We can fertilize and care for our soil right there on the spot from all the local farms that we have. Using
organics rather than petroleum-based pesticides.
Exactly so.
Fertilizers and things like that.
Right. So we have local dairy farms. We have local horses, we have local pig farms if you want such things, and chickens, but we have all of that for fertilizer there, and we actually are in Maine doing a fair bit of local composting and that. And then on top of that, the food is much more nutritious when it's local, it's much better for us when it's local, it's much better for our kids when it's local. And so those jobs, we create a web there, and when we have our own food source, we avoid a lot of the problems that we're having with trucking things in from Texas and California. And it means living closer, it means having a philosophy where we're living closer to home. We are so disconnected from our community. We don't even know our local farmers, most of us, and we don't know our local school teachers. We don't know a lot of what's happening locally. And the other is local energy as well. Maine could be a model for the nation on that. We have as much sunlight as they do in Arizona, and we have wind. And I am a little nervous about tidal power, depending on how it's used, but we have tidal as well, and we have all of those things at our disposal, and we're doing them all badly.
And couldn't we be building solar and windmills and rail for public transportation? Couldn't we be building that right here in the state of Maine?
This is an important thing when we're talking about again with things shifting. There are a lot of different ideas about what to do with the Brunswick Naval Air Station. Well, it's large enough we can do numerous things with it, but we've lost our manufacturing base. In some ways, that's depending on how toxic it is. Some of this maybe not so terrible to lose some of that, but we're putting our money into whatever money we are putting into at the government level into corporate concerns, our old polluting technologies, and we can be putting a lot of our tax dollars and our innovative money into newer technologies. We absolutely should and could be building solar panels. I think that's what we should be doing at the Brunswick Naval Air Station, and windmills, and putting them in areas that are not environmentally sensitive. I'm a huge fan of wind power, but not in a place that is pristine. We have Cutler down east, which is an old Navy, an old base there that is already polluted. On the water, lots of wind, lots of sun. We could have fields of both solar and wind power in areas that already have an infrastructure there.
And I think the state also has to get involved in helping to decentralize, because even if we go with wind and solar, to make it centralized is still part of the problem. We have to decentralize it and have the state involved in helping to ensure that we put solar collectors on houses and businesses, not just some big centralized facility.
Absolutely, and Maine, as large a state as we are, they've done this in Chicago, they've done this in New York, they've done this in the populated areas where they've taken buildings, and in some places, and I believe it's in Chicago, you may not build another new building unless it has some kind of solar collector and or the rooftops that have the grass and such, so that you're not adding to the problem. Yeah. And there's absolutely no reason we can't do that here, even though we're a smaller state. And we've been in, this is, dear ago I lead, Maine should be right at the cutting edge of that stuff. So locally, those things, we can be bringing those things back, and because Maine is so huge, and because so many people come here and are dependent on the fact that Maine, we want to keep the character of Maine as it is. We are in a perfect position to be able to be a model for the rest of the country on a lot of these issues, and be able to keep our character and still provide what we need for jobs and energy.
Why do you think that more people aren't speaking up and demanding these very ideas that you're talking about? That makes sense. Mm-hmm. If we're listening closely, we know that this is the direction the country needs to be going. And I do think, I don't want to say that nothing is going on around these issues, because there is a lot of work, but why isn't there more? Why isn't the public more engaged in really helping to demand these kind of things?
Well, I think that there's several reasons why. First, for people like me who are out in the field a lot and doing this, there's just the sheer level of exhaustion. There are so many issues to cover that are important, extraordinarily important, and so it's very divisive. We're very kind of divided up. There's impeachment, and there's environmental issues, and there's healthcare issues, and economic development, sustainable economic development, and other social issues. So there's that. But as far as the rest of them, we're kind of kept, I think, frightened, dumb, in a compartment, because so long as we're frightened, so long as we're kept afraid because we're being attacked, or afraid because of some kind of outside influence, it's easy to keep people kind of in line. I'm actually more concerned. There's a bigger fear here, I think, whereby we are just we're afraid to even talk out logically with our friends. The Democratic Party isn't going to speak. Nobody within the Democratic Party is going to speak out against anybody else in the Democratic Party, and the fear is that we'll be seen as a domestic enemy, no matter what we do at this point. And people are we're so disconnected from our communities. We so want to be part of community, I think, that we're afraid to say anything that's not going to mesh with what we're being fed through the media and through our political parties. And
so in other words, we go along to get along. Is that what you mean?
I do believe that's the case, and I think that the core of that doesn't come from necessarily a bad place. I think it comes from a place of really wanting to be connected to community, and being so not wanting to be an outcast from that.
But on the other hand, you can't have a vital democracy, because the whole idea of democracy and citizen participation is that people do need to speak up, and they do need to make demands. So how do you reconcile that contradiction?
Well, that's a good question. As I said at an impeachment rally just recently, this what's happening now politically is exactly how we create terrorists, if you will. You marginalize anybody who doesn't agree with you, and that's happening even with people who are our friends, if you will, in the progressive and democratic communities.
You mean you give them no hope that they can have input and that they can have a voice?
You may not disagree. And
they become desperate, and they take extraordinary, desperate measures. That's what you're saying. That's
what I'm saying. We cannot have a dialogue. We cannot disagree. There's no place to disagree anymore. It's so you're either with us or against us.
You're boxed in.
Yeah.
Feeling of isolation. Yeah. Well, Kathleen, we're running out of time. I'll give you 1 minute for a close. How's that?
Okay.
Anything you'd like to say to end the show?
Yes. Well, we have both immediate and systemic challenges in front of us, and we need to really look carefully. We need to reconnect with our community. We need to look carefully at where some of those obstacles are, and some of those obstacles include places where we think we can get help where we can't. So one of the biggest obstacles to some of the things that we try to achieve at the state level are the agencies themselves. Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, and Department of Marine Resources, and the Governor's Office, and the Department of Environmental Protection, which we call the Department of Economic Protection, and places where we once thought we could go for help, we can't anymore. And we're going to have to start taking that really into our own hands. And after what I've said about how we need to go, we kind of are going along to get along, it's more and more difficult. But we need to have more conversations locally in our local areas, in Bath and in Brunswick and in Wisconsin and Damariscotta and in Eastport, and figure out how we as communities are going to basically take back what it is we've lost at the higher levels of government.
Well, Kathleen McGee, thank you for coming on the show again.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. And thank you for watching another edition of This Issue. Until next time, good luck to you all, and please get organized.